Activity, huh? Isn't it beautiful? Hi, my name is Bill Moyer, and I am the executive director and co-founder of the Backbone Campaign. Well, the Backbone Campaign's actually evolved. It evolved originally from an affinity group that was mobilized during the Bush administration, a group of artists principally, who gathered and did creative actions, freeway bannering, large puppets in some of the early large demonstrations. It evolved to the theme of the Backbone, with Backbone Awards and a giant backbone puppet and a backbone platform. Early on, we had this idea that maybe we could give the Democrats a backbone, but it very quickly evolved into a movement-building organization that was trying to identify key problems and be sort of on the cutting edge of trying to find solutions for those problems. You know, I have my story of why I think the Occupy movement is happening. Backbone Campaign might have been on the front, but we weren't that far from of other people or the society. We're just trying to guess what's coming next. You know, we were early to talk about impeachment. Then everyone was disappointed, right, because there was no accountability. And it was impunity is now the tradition here. Throughout that time, a lot of us were enamored with the new technology of the internet. The thing that became our dominant tactical tool were, you know, email petitions and emails to our members of Congress, etc. Folks like Move On, who really grew up as a faux movement organization based in the Beltway, associated with the political party, reinforced that. We lost track of a whole spectrum of tactics that we had used throughout other times. We became sort of anemic in how we approached social change, and we started to, the sort of non-profit industrial complex really began to dominate what it meant to be active. And that was very ineffective. And thus, the power of corporate America, the collusion between corporate and elected power, you know, only became more entrenched. I think people didn't really wake up to the fact that we were in a rut until the Paulson plan. For Backbone Campaign, we also didn't quite get it until then. At that point, if you remember, it was the end of the Bush administration prior to the election, and that Hank Paulson was going to propose $700 billion bailout of the banks, AIG. And remember, that $700 billion was, at that time, what we had paid for the Iraq War in its entirety. We gathered all of our Netroots allies, and we led a campaign with an alternative to the Paulson plan that was our most effective ever. We reached out to millions of people. We generated 140,000 emails to Congress. But what did Congress do? Congress turned on their spam filters and turned off their phones, basically ignored us. Well, the big Beltway groups having their conference calls trying to organize their allies. I was on a couple of those calls. It was a very, very interesting moment. At one of the second or third call I participated in, U.S. Action, Renew and Rebuild America, and all these folks were on the call, and they said, well, okay, they're going to do a workaround in the Senate, and so just tell your people to go get out the vote. And my jaw hit the floor. It's like, oh my God, you guys, this is the time when more people on the left and on the right are in agreement about something. This is our Argentina moment where we should be banging pots and pans in the street, and all we can tell our people is go get out the vote. We should be ashamed to call ourselves movement leaders if that's the best we can offer. So for me, that was a turnaround. It was, for me, it convinced me that the Beltway progressive organizations were not where change came from. That it had to come from communities. Backbone Campaign was engaged in some local fight to save an island from becoming an industrial gravel mine. And we had the amazing experience of actually winning, of actually delivering a victory for our community that was going to make a difference in their lives. We went from 50 to 500 people mobilized in less than a month. For me, that solidified that change happens in communities. We go forward to, we see Obama put Rahm Emanuel as a chief of staff, create his economic advisors from Goldman Sachs, the authors of the problem and the status quo. We knew these were false solutions. We knew there was no hope here. We saw the Beltway progressives line up under a healthcare program that was spineless, and instead of pulling a left flank, they lined up under a president with no talk of a real alternative, Medicare for all. So of course things are going to go badly. Instead of universal health care to public option to private mandate, which is a horrible idea. So again, we lost. The Beltway lost all credibility, and Obama was losing credibility. I was out here during the day before inauguration. People, total strangers, were hugging each other on the streets. We were having conversations across class and race lines. All of a sudden, we felt a hope. Well, some of us knew better. There's no Messiah going to get elected by this system and deliver hope and change we could believe in. But because the Democratic Party and because the Beltway progressive organizations who were posing as movement leaders failed to capture that moment of the Paulson Plan, capture the moment of the healthcare debate, the administration and this whole system betrayed our trust. People became despondent, and it also, remember, nature abhors a vacuum. It created this large opening for the Tea Party to arise, a faux populism that offered no critique of the status quo, a populism that appeals to what's absolutely worst in people, our fear, our xenophobia, our greed, and we were without any positive alternative. Well, people understand that Obama was not a solution. People understand that the Tea Party is not offering a solution. With 30% of American mortgages underwater, and 10% or whatever the real unemployment numbers are in the country, and people burdened with that in so many ways, it's only a matter of physics that is going to find a way to bubble up. And it was not happening through the structures and the avenues that were offered to it. And so, when folks identified someone that we could all unify around as an opponent, as an enemy, as a villain, Wall Street, aided by some interesting developments with the Supreme Court, the Citizens United decision, that really brought corporate personhood, a 130-year tradition, out in the open and popularized opposition to it because it's so distasteful. These forces in our society had to become something. So of course the Occupy Wall Street thing took off. Things like the Seize DC that evolved into the Occupy Freedom Plaza. It appropriately became part of that larger phenomenon, which is a populist uprising that may be called Occupy last month, that may be Occupy this month and next month. But it doesn't necessarily have to maintain that brand identity to reflect an actual impulse in the society and really internationally of power relationships. And of course, when you push people too far, they're going to rebel. I've always thought that part of what was so beautiful about Occupy is that you can consider the physical space of the occupation to be a metaphor for a more important, it may be essential aspect of occupying our own imaginations, occupying our aspirations, occupying our authority, and occupying our power. I personally believe that though we need to continue to provide positive proposals, that the places of the occupations, these parks in the middle of winter, are not utopian societies. They're not our utopian petri dish. They're easily become an example or a way to show of all the failures of our structure, the failures of our social safety net. And though we're being blamed often for the dysfunction that happens, in these places, this dysfunction did not start with Occupy, for God's sakes. It's the humane thing, the compassionate thing to do is to reach out and serve people. And I understand that, and yet I struggle, like I see a lot of people struggling with, is that really our focus as Occupy? As movement catalysts, social service, surrogate social service, utopian society? Or is it really a place to come together, build skills, strategize, discuss what are the things that are deeply affecting us? What are our common goals and enemies? What are our common dreams and aspirations? And how do we work for those? It's a way. I love that Occupies now are all talking to each other. I love that things are bubbling out of Occupies. Because, again, if things get bogged down, I'm not worried about that, really, because I think it will find a way to bubble up. But I kind of hope that we don't waste too much energy in that, because we have such great opportunity right now. And we want to make sure that the people who've come to Occupy and maybe left because they couldn't find a place or it didn't suit them, have a way to come back and stay involved. Because the reason they came is still valid. The reasons they came are still valid. So, my hope is that we establish our identity early on in the Occupy, as we the people, as an uprising of the people, not an uprising of marginal pieces of society, but as really the people, and that we identify the values that we have: democracy, community, human dignity, economic fairness, etc. And now that we should be evolving and looking for the strategies that are going to pull people into this movement and grow this movement.